Good afternoon. It's Monday the 16th of March 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Ryan Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, and behind the technical desk, Nick Green. Well, you might have guessed the weather in Plymouth pretty chilly. In fact, it's 6 degrees, but it feels a lot colder. We felt the need in the studio to woolly pulley day today, basically. Across the country, much the same, grey skies, pretty chilly, drizzle in some areas, pretty gloomy. That's how we like it. Well, we are going to start our news today with a sad announcement, the death of Harry Beckoff. Harry, at 101, has been a stalwart campaigner against the European Union and the steady erosion of honesty and morality in British politics. And we understand that he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. We've got a photograph here of Harry. This was actually taken at his 100th birthday party in Marlborough. And as you can see, my goodness, what a sprightly gentleman he was at 100. And his mind still very, very active, and he was deeply concerned about what was happening in Britain and where the corruption and criminal activity was coming from. Now, Harry Beckoff originally during World War II was working as a code breaker at Bletchley Park. He's produced a number of printed articles and books, and if you simply Google his name, you can find some excellent video clips of him on YouTube. So there we are, really the end of an era, but an inspiration to us all, and Harry really showed us how to do it. If he could still be campaigning at 100, none of us have got any excuses whatsoever.
Indeed.
Well, we understand that Melanie Shaw is due to appear in Nottingham, or may already have appeared in Nottingham Crown Court this morning. And we're going to give you a reminder of the remarkable things going on around this child abuse victim and whistleblower. We showed last week the fact that she'd finally been able to get a letter out from Peterborough Prison. In it, she is saying exactly the same things as when she was previously held in the prison, that she wasn't receiving medical treatment, she was effectively being bullied, and she was finding it very difficult to communicate, especially with a lady acting as her lay legal advisor. So we just bring that on screen, please, Nick. We'll just, there we are, sorry, my fault. There we are, a before and after shot of Melanie Shaw on the left as she really is, on the right after a relatively short period of time in profit-making Sodexo prison in Peterborough. This was a letter received by the UK column team last week, at the end of last week, and in it she says she's been denied medication, letters, bedding, showers or baths, towels, etc. Now we know that Melanie has told us the truth about what's happened to her in this prison previously. But what is now happening is that it appears the British state is prepared to crush this very brave lady. So let's have a look at what's been happening around the Crown Court appearance today. We can tell you that more charges have been piled on. So at the moment, Melanie is charged with a false imprisonment. She's charged with crimes against the Telecommunications Act. And now suddenly we've got 2 counts of harassment against persons unknown. What a remarkable charge that is. And we understand that one of the judges who's previously heard Melanie's cases has said that she must accept the Nottingham law firm VHS Fletchers to represent her. Now let's remember, this is the firm that Melanie sacked because she simply didn't trust them, and they've been passing off clerks as if they were solicitors. And now the judge has said to her that if she refuses to accept this law firm, then he's going to bring her mental competence into question. We've already said in this news announcement that Melanie's lay legal advisor has been blocked from contacting her in prison, and also VHS Fletchers are refusing to acknowledge the written authority to act that Melanie gave her lay legal advisor back in October last year. And this is the last of the matter, really. VHS Fletchers have apparently asked for Judge Pert to rehear the case. So we've now got law firms deciding which judge they want to present the case. Remarkable, Mike.
The abusive process in this case is staggering, and there can be no explanation for it other than to shut this woman up.
Well, this is it. If we look at the sheer hypocrisy, of course, of Theresa May in particular, she's busy saying she's getting on with the child abuse inquiry, which has taken months to bring to fruition. What are they doing with Melanie Shaw? If you add up all of the evidence, there can only be one answer, and that is they want her shut up. And my guess is that they're going to go flat out to get her deemed unable to plead, and we will see Melanie Shaw disappear into a psychiatric unit. That is, unless enough members of the public start to really get hold of this case and realise what it tells us about the British government and, of course, Theresa May in particular. Just utterly disgraceful.
Yeah. Okay, finance news now. And over the weekend, it was announced that Britain is going to be joining the Asian Infrastructure Bank. This is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, part of the BRICS. And of course, the United States squealed with frustration at the news. They were very wary, they said, about a trend towards constant accommodation of China, which is not the best way to engage a rising power. That's a statement from the White House criticising Downing Street. Well, the Guardian here reporting that Downing Street said, there will be times when we'll take a different approach. We think that it's in the UK's national interest for the UK to join this bank. Well, I think that what's actually going on here is that the UK is so concerned about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank that they've decided to get in on the inside and do what Britain has always done and make sure that if they're in on the inside, they can sort of disrupt it and destroy. Yeah. So I think that's what's going on there. Other Commonwealth countries also getting involved in that, but certainly the US getting a bit upset about it in the meantime. Press release from the Bank of England today or over the weekend, the agencies and the one bank. And this is really referring to the Bank of England's various agencies around the country, small organisations that provide agency services for the bank. And they say for gathering intelligence. So the bank concerned, for example, that they don't get any direct idea of the impact of crowdsourcing and other forms of finance other than bank finance, and so they have these groups of people that act as local agents around the country and meet with business leaders and try to get an idea of how businesses are doing, what the situation is with credit in their local areas, how the housing market is doing, and these kind of things. And it says here the Bank of England's agencies have a long-standing role to provide economic intelligence to the Monetary Policy Committee, principally through regular meetings with businesses to take the temperature of the UK economy. In recent years, these agents have also been increasing the amount of intelligence gathered and synthesised on behalf of the bank's financial stability functions. The development of that part of the agent's work has given added impetus to the creation of the Financial Policy Committee and the Prudential Regulation Authority, and the one bank approach subsequently set out in the bank's strategic plan. And I think I probably haven't mentioned this before to anybody, so I thought it would be a good time to bring it up, the creation of the one bank. This was beginning in April 2013. The Bank of England experienced its most important institutional and functional changes in a generation as the government introduced wholesale changes to the UK regulatory landscape in response to failings in pre-crisis arrangements. So this is the removal of the Financial Services Authority in replacement with the Prudential Regulation Authority, the Financial Policy Committee, and so on. So they brought all that regulation into the Bank of England, which had been at least notionally independent from it before And they created what they're calling a single unified institution, one bank, and that will maximize its impact by working together across all its functions. And what this really mirrors, to my mind, Brian, is the sort of multi-agency, the MAPA approach. The multi-agency approach, you bring everybody into one bank, and now there is no separation of powers, no separation of responsibilities, and no way for any genuine oversight over what anybody's actually doing. So perhaps unsurprisingly that the bank has found itself under the watchful gaze of the Serious Fraud Office.
It is in front of our eyes what's going on at the moment. Of course, the police, same thing happening, amalgamation of the police north of the border. We've got regionalisation of the police south of the border, so everything brought under one control. The other thing to remember, of course, is that David Cameron's Alinsky-based big society has also been bringing in funding on a big scale, so that every one of these third sector charities and social entrepreneur organisations is also linked back into this mess of finance.
Yes. Interesting article here on the Telegraph. There's got quite a few Telegraph slides for me today. I do apologise for that. But anyway, this is Liam Halligan, who has another interesting article. Suggest everybody has to go and look at it. Currency wars threaten Lehman-style crisis. There have been talks about currency wars for quite some time now, but we're really starting to see some big disparities with regards to the euro and other currencies at the moment. He begins by saying, global currency markets made front-page headlines last week as the euro plunged towards parity with surging dollar, and the pound similarly soared against the single currency. But why is the dollar so buoyant and the euro spiralling downward? And he goes on to make the valid point that, of course, quantitative easing is a fairly large part of it. You know, at the end of the day, the printing presses have begun. 1.1 trillion euros to be printed over the period of the QE, and you know, 1.1 trillion euros. Where's it going to go?
Into the balloon.
It's going into the banks, and will it ever see the light of real economic use? Not very likely. But in the meantime, the market's pretty unhappy with the fact that it's happening at all. Right, pensions, the other big. Many people, I'm sure, will have seen much of the advertising that's going on around pensions at the moment. And of course, the big news in the run-up to the election is the fact that pensioners are going to be able to choose what they do with their own annuities. Well, George Osborne over the weekend was getting a bit upset about the criticism of that, because obviously people suggesting that if pensioners are left to their own devices to do as they will with their own annuities, they're likely to go on holidays and things like that and leave the taxpayer with bills that otherwise they may not have received.
They can't do that, though, Mike, of course, because they can't get out of the country.
We will come on to that. Yes,
okay.
Yes. So George Osborne saying that this is a patronising criticism, that really pensioners are much more intelligent than that, and that's not really what the policy is about. Well, in fact, that is what his entire policy is about. He is hoping that pensioners are going to blow at least part of their annuities on extra houses for their grandchildren or student loans and this kind of stuff. Feeding themselves. Well, it's unlikely if they've got that amount of money in their pension pot, but you know, the hope is that quite a lot of this money is going to be spent, that he's going to get a tax dividend as a result, and a boost to the real economy, which I don't know whether you've seen the news of what's going on in Scotland at the moment. I'm sure David will talk about this on Friday with the high street in Scotland, something like 6 shops in the high street every week closing and significantly less opening. So Scotland, and as well as the rest of the UK, seeing the absolute consumer bust that we're seeing at the moment. And I think this is a pretty cynical approach by George Osborne to try and get a bit of a boost just prior to the election. And it's going to backfire on him with any luck.
I think I'm right in saying his brother's been in the spotlight over the weekend, I think, as a psychiatrist who seems to keep falling foul of the rules.
Oh.
I think we'll have to follow up on that. We'll bring it in because I think we should be fair. If there's brothers, we should report equally on them. Presumably they work to the same standards. Well, if that's what's going on in the Tory party, life is getting very interesting in Wales because there's effectively been a defection. Luke Ellis has stood away from Labour in South Wales, and in particular his boss, Carwyn Jones, with some quite extraordinary statements. He says essentially that Labour is nothing more than a cult-like mafia that is frightened of free speech, terrified of dissenting voices. And he also describes Ed Miliband as a hapless chuckle brother. So this is getting quite interesting. South Wales, of course, which has been a Labour heartland for many years and has produced, I would say, some fairly dubious politicians. We've now got people on the streets saying we've had enough of this. And information that's been passed into the Welsh Assembly, in particular about the abuse of children, and of course the Linda Lewis child kidnap case, we believe is starting to cause some fractions. So good to see that Luke Ellis has decided to stand up and be counted. And wouldn't it be wonderful if people in South Wales now gathered around him to give him support for his bravery in coming forward? Well, if that's the state of Labour in Wales, you need a quality person to come in as a candidate, and who better than Stephen Kinnock? And here we are with the South Wales Evening Post saying that he's been put forward for the safe Aberavon Labour seat. So we're desperate to get him into politics to follow mummy and daddy. But local people in Wales have got a special name for this man, who of course married the Danish Prime Minister. So here she is, or here's the happy couple. And what are they calling this man? Well, he's now apparently called the Prince of Denmark. And many people deeply cynical that here comes Labour trying desperately to get him in to follow mum and dad on the gravy train with the European Union. That's about all we can say, isn't it?
But we're going to follow up with an even better picture. There you go. Tony Blair. So he's going to step back from his Middle East peace envoy role. I'm sure Louise is probably going to be upset I've done this one today rather than tomorrow, but it couldn't be missed. He's going to step back from this. Just about everybody is cheering, actually. Everybody in the Middle East, anyway. They all thought he was rubbish. And of course, he was really only put in the role as by way of a sort of, maybe this is too cynical or something, but by way of a payoff for what he did in the Middle East.
It's UK column, Mike. I don't think you can be too cynical on this programme. Okay,
so anyway, he's looking very fetching there, isn't he? He's been very ineffective at his job. He has no credibility in this part of the world, and that was one diplomat telling the Financial Times. So he's way off to beg to John Kerry to see whether he can step down. Sooner the better. But back in this country then, the NHS, well, that isn't being privatised.
No. Well, David Cameron said repeatedly that the NHS isn't being privatised, so of course that is the truth.
So now we know that the 11 firms that are going to get the benefit of this £780 million, and this is to carry out operations, perform scans, x-rays and other things. So we've got Alliance Medical Limited, Care UK Clinical Services Limited, Circle Health Limited, Cobalt Unit Appeal Fund, Diagnostic World Limited, InHealth Limited, Medical Imaging Partnership Limited, Nuffield Health, Ramsay Healthcare UK, Regent's Park Cardiovascular Solutions, Vanguard Healthcare Solutions. So there you go, 11 of them, £780 million.
Many of them, of course, with Conservative MPs with complete vested interests in those companies. But this is not privatisation.
No. Asset stripping. What's next? Oh, yes, lockdown. So here we go. drivers will face 5 mile queues for ferries. Now, we mentioned this situation before because the rules change on the 8th of April with regard to passports and where passports get read. So it used to be that you left Britain and basically passport control didn't care who you were. Now they seem to want to care who you are. And of course, we've had the reports in the media going back a few months now, warning that in some cases, if you happen to owe some council tax, for example, or you owe some money on your TV license, that perhaps you wouldn't be permitted to leave the country. Well, it seems that contrary to the wishes of the various select committees that actually were pushing for this, the government has run roughshod over their recommendations, jumped in with both feet and said from the 8th and not a day later, you will start monitoring all people leaving the country. And as a result, the ferry companies really warning here that they're just not going to be able to cope with it. It's going to double the check-in time for everybody. And what they're talking about doing is having queues of people waiting on the A20 off the motorway, waiting for their turn to move forward.
Do you think there are still people in this country that don't realise that a dictatorship is being formed in front of our eyes with border controls, lockdown, you can't travel?
It's certainly pretty much in your face now, isn't it? The excuse of debt as being a mechanism for preventing you leaving the country. This is supposed to be a civil matter, is it not? It's not, you haven't committed any kind of criminal offence in most cases. So, you know, where do you draw the line on this? It seems like a pretty draconian thing to do. And if people are prepared to sit down and accept that, I think maybe
we're in a bad position. Yeah. Well, what do we do about this? We have been releasing all of the video clips from the British Constitution Group Spring Conference from a couple of weeks ago. We're pleased to say the latest to be released is the introduction, and Ruby Paul, who was very kind and came along and played the harp both in the opening and later on during the evening meal. Now, we did this to bring a bit of proper culture into the event and also to get people listening to music, which was indeed uplifting and motivating. So it broke us away from the Muzak as pumped out, particularly by the BBC. So I would encourage you to have a listen to this. Will be played out immediately after the news. But also the other videos you can get hold of via the British Constitution Group website. And we'd like to give a special thank you to Bastion Radio. They've been putting out some very good material and were kind enough to give me the opportunity to do an interview with them last night. If you haven't heard that, you can find that via their station, www.bastionradio.com. And I believe you can also find the interviews on YouTube. Okay, well, there we are. Things are getting very serious indeed. And who are the players behind the scenes? Well, just have a look at this report from Russia today of 100 US armoured vehicles rolling into Latvia, as it says NATO flexes its muscles in Europe. This is a classic photograph, I believe, because it really sets the scene. We have David Cameron standing on the world stage and effectively ramping up war and violence, pointing a finger at Putin. But of course, David Cameron has been cutting British armed forces to the bone. So whose troops are going to be put in harm's way? Well, principally it's going to be American servicemen and women who are going to be put at risk as a result of David Cameron's hostile foreign policy. But what would the British reaction be if we saw Russian tanks lining up in France or indeed coming through Scotland, operating on our borders?
I mean, we've seen some of the reaction based on what the criticism of Russian tanks operating in Ukraine. So you can only imagine how much more serious it would be were they significantly closer. How much provocation is Putin expected to take?
Well, we're about to see, aren't we? Because things are getting very interesting indeed around the Russian president.
Well, of course, at the time of this program being made. We still don't know where Vladimir Putin is. He's been missing for a few days, and the Western media just almost apoplectic over the speculation. They're publishing just about every theory that they can possibly find at the moment, in the hope that one of them is correct. So, has there been a coup? Has he got the flu? Is it something to do with Nemtsov and so on? Nobody really seems to know where he is. And he is, of course, expected to have a meeting today with the Kazakhstan president. So whether that happens or not remains to be seen.
Well, we watch it with carefully. The BBC, of course, tremendously outspoken in its aggressive reporting of all matters to do with Russia and Mr. Putin. But Mr. Putin, we understand, is getting very concerned that he's now dealing with Western leaders who are simply not in the right mental state to deal with. How does Russia form foreign policy when effectively it's dealing with criminals acting within government? Are we prepared to say that? Well, certainly as far as the UK is concerned, and we've only got to watch the Conservative Party's clamp down on the child abuse issue to know what's really going on. Never mind Mr. Rifkin's standing down as head of the Intelligence Committee, and of course we've got other matters going on with the banks and so forth. Well, here's President Putin. He's now quoted as saying that he actually took steps towards putting Russia's nuclear weapons into a state of combat readiness. This is how seriously the Russians have been taking the provocation in Europe, ramped up, of course, by David Cameron in particular. And we're now seeing the world taken to a very dangerous point as a result of this aggressive overseas policy coming from Westminster.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the man concerned. Here he is, David Cameron. And we've got an important question to ask, and that's basically, is this man running scared? Just what has he been up to? And according to reliable reports to the UK column over the weekend, Prime Minister David Cameron has called on the military police for protection. And we understand that additional Royal Navy personnel are being trained in close protection weapons and procedures in support of the military police. So our question is David frightened of the British public, or has he actually been a naughty boy where Russia is concerned, and now he's suddenly realising that his politicking in Eastern Europe is a dangerous policy? So we'll leave you to think about that. It's quite a remarkable story. As I say, the sources were exceptionally good. So British Prime Minister running so scared he now needs the protection of the very military, of course, who have been losing their jobs and equipment, while David Cameron ramps up the move towards war in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Well, here's another politician, of course, setting the scene for Britain, Jack Straw. He's been rebuffed by the European Commission for lobbying on behalf of his firm, or his agency firm, ED&F Man. And this is in relation to sugar production. What is the location? The Ukraine. And so in the Telegraph article here, it said during a meeting in his parliamentary office, Mr. Straw later boasted on camera that he'd secured changes to separate rules governing sugar production in Ukraine and at a European level in Brussels. So for us, it seems an interesting coincidence that first the Lib Lab Con stirs up the unrest and violence in Ukraine, and then they're manoeuvring behind the back door to create lucrative deals, in this case over sugar. But have a look at this, because right at the end of the Daily Telegraph article was a single sentence. It said that campaigner Vicky Cann of Corporate Europe Observatory had added politicians should stick to representing their constituents and carrying out parliamentary duties rather than working as guns for hire. Now, those seem to be fairly reasonable comments, except UK column was very interested as to who the corporate Europe Observatory actually were. So let's have a look. Well, here's the website, and it says it's a research and campaign group working to expose and challenge the privileged access and influence enjoyed by corporations and their lobby groups in EU policy making. All seems okay. Well, a bit more, we discover that they're actually based in Brussels, so clearly unaligned, and they're into everything: environment, economy, finance, food, agriculture, international trade, and they're looking at the power of lobbies. And in the staff, we can see the lady herself, Vicky Can, mentioned. Well, we thought we'd have a look at where they get funding. And we were very interested in Isvara Foundation because it rang a bell with us. What's special about Isvara? Well, just have a look at this. Because here they are, and what do they have to say? It says the foundation was established in 2007, and the foundation's grant making since then is fully financed from a personal donation. The foundation is administered by a foundation board at UBS Zurich, Switzerland. But don't worry, because Isvara is fully independent, except it would appear of the banks. Well, here we are. Here's UBS, and you can trust them because they're going to work in community affairs and they're going to be working in partnership to change our lives. So let's have a look at it all together. Here is Corporate Europe Observatory. We think with unbelievable hypocrisy, taking money from a powerful bank, who of course will be in the background assisting the lobbying. Here's the reporter, journalist Luke Hayton, formerly reported here in an article by The Sun. Is this man just a poor reporter, sloppy journalism, or is this about a bit of nudging to try and get the public to miss the fact that we've got corporate agenda driving the very Corporate Europe Observatory, which is supposed to be protecting us? We'll leave it with a slight pause there. It's getting easier and easier to see that the mainstream news either running poor quality journalism or they are deliberately pushing out propaganda to deceive us. But of course, what a wonderful story from Jack Straw to UBS Bank in one article. Well, where do we go from that? We think we should give an announcement that our UK column meeting this week will not be at the usual location at the George Hotel in Plimpton. We will in fact be meeting in Totnes, and we would ask everybody who's listening or watching this broadcast to help spread that message. We don't want anybody left at the George, but we will be joining up with Steve Hopwood in his new venue. Well, it's really for a launch of that venue with the UK column team. Yeah. So Wednesday, Totnes, not Plimpton.
Details on the website.
Excellent. Yep. Mike, how are you feeling? Because you've had tombola, which is a pretty serious virus infection. 1C, I believe.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Well, I'm still here, and of course Mike should recover because he's a single individual, but two fat ladies or a full house and tombola can really take you down. Yeah. We'll leave you on a smiling note. Do have a look at the newspapers and press and media, and of course do your own research into the information UK columns putting across. Meanwhile, we'll leave you to think of David Cameron not sleeping as well as he used to, and now going to rely on the support of the military police, who he's cut to the bone in previous defence cuts. There we are. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.